Hey everyone, it's Bob the BA, and today we're going to tackle another sensitive issue. Why? Well, one of the things that I believe about Sing Your Life is to be extraordinary, that we can all live to be the most extraordinary version of ourselves. And I wrote down quite some time ago a little thing in my deep thoughts, and I said, I don't think that one can be extraordinary if one stays silent. And I've had advice before about, if you're a keynote, you've got to stand up because not everyone has the platform. So, what's interesting in the past few weeks, I have found myself doing some educating in areas where I didn't think I would have to. And specifically, they were on the concepts of racism, bias, and white privilege. And it's those three very things that I want to touch on very quickly to make sure people understand it's Black Lives Matter and it's not All Lives Matter and why there's a difference. All right. Now, it goes without saying all lives should matter, right? That's an ethic. We should all value life above everything else. Having said that, there's a lot going on in our world where people don't do that. They don't value life above everything else. But what's happening here is that people, when they hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, they equate it to, well, we should value all life. And that's actually not what the movement's really about. The movement's about helping people understand and to correct social injustices that have been done based off of color. Well, to really get into this and understand how it all works, I want to take you back to a definition of what racism and bias are. So I'm going to go to Jeffrey S. Dennis's book called Sociology on Racism. And they define racism, and I'm going to make sure I get it right here. I'm going to put on my glasses. They define racism as individual and group level processes and structures that are implicated in the reproduction of racial inequality. So, in other words, systematic racism happens when these structures or processes are carried out by groups with power, whether it be an individual, a government, a school, a business, whatever. Now, what we're saying here, active. Something actively has happened. In other words, someone's acted to create a social injustice based off of color. So one benefits, one does not. Now, this is different than bias. Bias in itself is not racism. Bias is a belief system that you may have believed based on what you were taught, learned, what you learned on the internet. A lot of things happen. All right, we form biases. And these biases are also often associated with stereotypes, like the stereotype that people of color are more likely to commit crimes. There's no research on that, not true. I mean, there's research on it, but it's not true in the sense of that stereotype. Crimes are equally opportunistic based off of any color. All Asians are good at math. There's another bias stereotype. So, also not true. All fat white men are lazy. Now, I admit to having a lazy streak within me, but I can get up and do what I need to do when I need to do it. So, these stereotypes have existed because someone taught us that they were okay to think. The difference between bias and racism is when we decide to take one of those and act on it. And once we've crossed that line and we've acted on it, we've created an injustice. Now, to explain the differences between colors and talking about white privilege, I'm going to do a little test. Now, the first thing we need to know about white privilege is that it's not a sin to be white, have white privilege. It's about recognizing that it exists and then determining how you're going to use that forward to correct social injustice. White privilege is the concept that based off of being white, you have not had to endure things that people of color had, and as a result creates inequality. And it's going to be a very simple test, and it's going to be very easy to make the point, and then we'll tie it all up with a bow. So I'm going to start with Allison Hoker and Stephen Boss, aka Twitch. They were on So You Think You Can Dance, reality competition, one of my favorite shows. And they fell in love, got married, interracial couple, two beautiful children. Twitch is known for being on The Ellen Show and Ellen's Game of Games. And Allison and Twitch went on her program to do this test. So we're going to recreate it right now. And thanks to Allison and Twitch for helping people to understand exactly what's happening with white privilege. So what you're going to do is you're going to put 10 fingers up, just like I've displayed in front of me here. And every time you can agree with something I say, you can put a finger down. If you can't agree with it, you don't put a finger down. And it's pretty straightforward. Okay. You can put a finger down if you've been called a racial slur. You can put a finger down if you've been followed in a store unnecessarily. You can put a finger down if someone crossed the street to avoid passing you. You can put a finger down if someone has clenched their purse on the elevator while you're riding on the elevator. You can put a finger down if someone stepped off the elevator to avoid riding with you. And that's based off of your color. You can put a finger down if you've been accused of not being able to afford something expensive. You can put a finger down if you've had legitimate fear in your heart when stopped by the police. You really thought they were going to harm you or do something. You can put a finger down if you've never gotten a pass by police on a citation that you actually deserved. In other words, they said, here's your warning, don't do it again. You know, you can put a finger down if that's never happened to you. You can put a finger down if you've been stopped or detained by the police for no valid reason whatsoever. Like they couldn't tell you it was for a taillight or whatever. They just stopped you. You can put a finger down if you've been bullied solely for your race. All right. You can put a finger down if you've been denied service solely for the color of your skin. You can put a finger down if you've had to teach your children how to not get killed by the police. And I can put my finger down for 4 of these. My experiences in life are a little bit different than some people. I've been beat up for who I am, but I still have white privilege. I have a lot of white privilege and I've benefited from it. Again, it's not a sin. It's about recognizing that in certain situations, I have an advantage that people of color do not. And this is what we need to adjust in our country. And we need to adjust biases as well, because the biases are often wrong. All right. And, you know, sometimes a bias can turn out to be correct, but it's what you choose to do with the bias. Do you want to treat it with kindness, or do you want to act on it in an evil way, which creates social inequality, the injustice? At the end of the day, when people are being killed for their color, yes, we're still going to value all lives, but there are social inequalities that are leading to these actions and causing problems. And that's what we need to be focused on. So I hope this has given you a little bit of a primer on what's going on in the education around it. I'm only scratching the surface. We could talk about this for hours, but I would just like people to know that message and share it a little bit more so that we can start thinking about how we're going to deal with it. At the end of the day, I just want people to have an equal opportunity at life in general, not just, you know, the whole success road, everyday life, because there's a lot of stuff that we have not been touching. And I want to put things in perspective just a little bit and wrap it up. You know, Juneteenth was just a little while ago. And what's interesting, what I learned is that there were still 3 states that did not recognize it. This is the emancipation of slavery, 1865. And yet we still have 3 states in the United States that have not recognized the emancipation of slavery. And I will call them out: North Dakota, South Dakota, and Hawaii. Why is that? Why can't we get on board here? And there's a million reasons. And you know what? We're just at the tip of the iceberg with dealing with everything else. What's happening to indigenous people, completely wrong, very messed up. You know, and we're still dealing with the sexism, the homophobia, you know, the general lack of rights that most people have anyway. And the list could go on and on and on. So today, think about these things. If you have an opportunity to educate someone, do, because being extraordinary means we can't stay silent. We need to educate, learn, grow. And that's what I want for each and every one of you, to be extraordinary, extraordinary. Be well.